Hello everybody, and once again, welcome back to our journey down the road to somewhere, and glad that you have joined us today. Don't know, some of you might have been new last week as we actually started what we're thinking of as seasons, because we have crossed over out of Oklahoma. We're in Texas now, and we're in the fifth major section of the Bible, which is the Gospels, which contain, of course, the story of the life of Jesus. For those of you that might have missed last week, again, Texas is our fifth state and our fifth section of the Bible. And when we use the word gospel, by the way, it's a Greek word, translation of a Greek word, euangelion, that's made up of two smaller words, one meaning simply good, and the other meaning a message or news. And so when we speak about the gospel of Jesus Christ, we're talking about the good news of Jesus Christ. We also get our word evangelism from that word euangelion, which simply means to talk to people about the good news about Jesus. So we're in the Gospels, and we're taking a little bit different approach, and that is, rather than specifically looking at the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I've divided up the life of Jesus into four major periods, and we're using each of the Gospels to kind of tune into that major area of the life of Christ. So we're in Texas, as I said, and Texas, we're up here in the Panhandle. Route 66 covers 178 miles in Texas across the Panhandle. And in our last time together, we were in Shamrock, Texas, home of the U-Drop Inn, if you might remember. And today we're going down the road, not really too far, about a half an hour, to McClean, Texas. And we will arrive in McClean, and when we arrive there, we're going to use Mark as our primary source of learning about the early ministry of Jesus. Last week we talked about the early life up through the age of 12, and then we have a gap, really, in Scripture up until the age of 30, and we'll look at what happens today just briefly. In the teaching video, I go into some detail on what happens at the age of 30. So again, part of what we're trying to do is this, our little times together on the road to somewhere are intended to take you through the book, The Road to Somewhere, the story behind it, but also to point you toward the teaching video that will take you into quite a bit more depth. So when we arrive in McClean, and we're using, again, Mark as our text, we're looking at the early ministry, sometimes referred to, by the way, as the year of popularity. It's actually a little longer than a year, but this is a time where Jesus' popularity and recognition is growing, where he has crowds that are now following him, and there's the beginning of the hint that this might in fact be the promised Messiah. And there is opposition growing, but when we look next week at the third phase of his life, we'll really see how that opposition begins to peak. So a little bit about McClean. Again, it's just 20 miles down the road, and population of only 777 people at the last census. It really has sort of two mottos. One of them is that they refer to themselves as the heart of Old Route 66. The other one is that they claim to be the town where time stands still. And when you kind of look at what you can see about McClean online, you realize that's probably a pretty good description of the town. Route 66 actually becomes Main Street as it runs through McClean, and there are two big attractions in McClean. One of them, which is a little strange, is that it has a museum dedicated to barbed wire. And barbed wire at a point in time used to be referred to as devil's rope. And so you can see here that this is the Devil's Rope Museum, and it shares, kind of in a funny way, it shares the Route 66 Museum also for this little town of McClean. Probably the best, most well-known attraction here that people stop to see for the nostalgia of Route 66 is it has this old Phillips 66 gas station, pretty well preserved actually, and it was the first Phillips 66 station in the state of Texas. And so oftentimes people, that's the place that they'll like to see as they go through McClean on Route 66. We're going to use this, I use it in the book as the place where John and Joy shoot the video for this book of the Bible and for this part of Route 66. Just a reminder, again, for those of you who might be new, that John and Joy, the two main characters of The Road to Somewhere, are filming a short video at each of these stops that are intended to lead people to a lecture on a specific book of the Bible connected to whatever stop they are at. And you always get both a link to this video that we're shooting right now, but also a link to the teaching video. So there's a link to the teaching video on Mark for this week that I really want to encourage you. If you didn't look at last week's on Matthew, there's really so much more information. The book was simply intended to be a little teaser to get people to look at those teaching videos. So I want to encourage you again to do that. But again, John and Joy, as they're shooting the video at this stop, they decide to use this filling station, this this Phillips 66 station, as a backdrop. And John begins the video by giving a brief introduction to the town of McClean and a little bit about the background on this old Phillips service station, and also lets his audience know that McClean is known as the town where time stands still, and then transitions out of Route 66 and again into the book of Mark. And I will really use the book of Mark to talk about the early ministry of Jesus. So last week we looked at his early life, and today we kind of focus in on his early ministry. John again reminds his audience that how that Matthew, Mark, and Luke contain much of the same material, and how the lectures then harmonize those three that covers and use it to cover certain periods of Jesus' life. He actually also tells his audience that there's a good chance that Mark is the oldest of the four Gospels. There's a lot of theories about timing on when the Gospels were written, and if Mark was like the original source, and that both Luke and Matthew kind of used Mark's Gospel when they were writing theirs. There's also a theory that there is a document that's never been found called the Q source, that the three of them used, and then some people think Mark was the Q source. So anyway, it's just interesting. Scholars are debating this all of the time. But one of the things about Mark, it's the shortest of the four Gospels, and it jumps right into the life of Christ. It does not have a nativity narrative in it about the birth of Jesus. It doesn't really talk anything about his early life. Really starts with the ministry of John the Baptist. And the other thing about Mark is one of the key words that, if depending on what translation you use, is the word immediately. It has a way of just really rapidly moving through the life of Christ. Many scholars believe that it was written to a Roman audience, whereas Matthew was targeted more at a Jewish audience, and that the Roman audience, that this action orientation of things happening very immediately would be an appeal to them. At this point in time, as after introducing John the Baptist, immediately Jesus comes and is baptized by John, and of course is then led by the Spirit out into the wilderness to be tempted. All of that is contained on the teaching video. And this event, the baptism and the temptation, really are what launches Jesus into public ministry. We're told he's about 30 years of age at this point in time. His ministry lasts about 3.5 years, so he probably was around 33 when he was crucified and he resurrected. But this event again kind of launches us then into his public ministry. I want to take just a moment break from the book because I want to talk about a part that isn't in the book. It is on the video, and that is what would be referred to as the early Judean ministry. This is only contained in the Gospel of John, and just to kind of give you an orientation, so Judea is that part of the Holy Land that contained Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And in the Gospel of Mark, Mark contains several events that aren't contained in the other Gospels. It's this early Judean part. That's why I think it's real important that you watch the teaching video, because it's in this early period where Jesus first encounters men that will ultimately become his disciples. He also moves up for just one event back up into Galilee to Cana, where he performs his first miracle of changing water into wine. Then he's back down in Jerusalem. In chapter 3, he has his famous encounter with Nicodemus, where he explains to Nicodemus that we all need to have a spiritual birth along with a physical birth. It's actually the only text in the Gospels or in the New Testament that uses the phrase born again. So when you hear that expression, that actually comes out of the Gospel of John when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus. Mark has Jesus quickly heading up then into the area of Galilee. And then whereas John has a whole chapter on the trip from Jerusalem to Galilee, where he has that famous encounter with the woman at the well in Samaria. So again, all of that's in the teaching video. So let me get back to John and the little video that he's shooting in the book. John mentions a number of things that Jesus does in his time in Galilee. He talks about Jesus calling the first disciples. One of the things I want to point out I think is real important. Let's say you're reading the Gospel of Mark. Jesus comes along, the disciples are there fishing on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus says, "Come, follow me," and immediately they leave their nets and they follow him. I think if you just read that without the context of knowing that John talks about a period perhaps as long as 6 months where there's already been some relationship between Jesus and these men. So it's not like just a stranger walks by, says, "Come follow me," and they drop everything and follow him. They already know something about him. They've been with him a bit, and yet it's here in the Gospel of Mark and Matthew and Luke where he calls those first disciples to come and follow him. Again, he tells, John in the video tells how this is a time of growing popularity for Jesus. He also tells how Jesus sets up what you might think of as his headquarters up here in the town of Capernaum. right on the Sea of Galilee, and he talks about how beautiful this part of the Holy Land is. This is an aerial view. This is the archaeological remains of the town of Capernaum are there. It's an amazing site when you go to visit it. Peter's house has been excavated. There's a synagogue that goes back at least to the 2nd century that was probably built on the 1st century synagogue. You can almost imagine just along the seashore there at the time of Christ, there would have been fishing boats lined up all along there because this was a fishing town. So this is all contained in the book about this phase of Jesus' ministry, and it's why it's really important you take time to watch the teaching video again on this session. So video really ends with John telling his audience that he's heading on to their next stop, which is Amarillo, the largest city in the panhandle of Texas, and that the corresponding book to Amarillo will be the Gospel of Luke. And then the period of Jesus' life where the emotional tide and the geopolitical tide really begins to turn against him. And so this will be the sort of the year of opposition, contrasted here with the year of popularity. So next stop is one of my favorites. We'll look at an attraction just outside of Amarillo that I think is one of the coolest things on Route 66, and we'll begin to look at the serious opposition against Jesus that will ultimately lead to our 4th video, which will be the Passion Week leading up to the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. So again, take some time, and you have a link to the teaching video on this on Mark, and hope you will take time to look at that. And thanks for being with us today, and I'll look forward to being back with you next week.